Good afternoon.
Afternoon, everyone.
We'll give it a couple of minutes for everyone to kind of slowly filter in, and then we'll get started, I think. If everyone would just like to make sure their microphones are muted, and just to let you know that this will be recorded. So if you don't want to appear on the camera, then please feel free to turn your camera off. They just keep coming. It's great to see so many people interested. Seems to have slowed down a little now, so it might be good to get started. I'm sure everyone will catch up if they join us afterwards, not a problem. So again, just to confirm, we will be recording this session, so we can share that out. So if you'd like to turn your camera off, that's absolutely no problems. And obviously, if everyone could just make sure their microphones are muted, so to allow whoever's speaking to have everyone's attention, that'd be great. Thank you very much. I'd also like to say, if you have any questions along the way, please pop them in the chat, and we'll be having a Q&A section at the end. So we'll pick up those questions at the end, and yeah, we'll pick up those questions at the end and have plenty of time to talk through those, hopefully. So without any further ado, I'd like to get started, and thank you all so much for coming. We've got representatives from all over the place, or a lot of local councils and organisations across Wales, which is great to see that there's so much interest in our show and tell. So let's get started. The topic of the topic of the conversation. Are we recording already? Yep, sorry, I couldn't see the thing. Thank you for confirming. So yeah, the topic of the conversation is digital accessibility, with a focus on the ambition for Wales. So let's get started. So the digital strategy for Wales states that to deliver and modernise services, so they're designed around user needs, are simple, secure, and convenient. And what that really means is that there is a kind of a joined up and effective public services designed to meet user needs, and those user needs should be all members of the public. So we recognise that the user-centered design is essential in providing a more accessible and inclusive services, and eliminating barriers from people being able to use them. So the digital service standard for Wales is grouped into three main themes: meeting the user needs, creating good digital teams, and using the right technologies. And if we dig a bit more into those meeting user needs, it's broken into 5 kind of key areas. So the focus on the current and future well-being of the people of Wales, designing services in Welsh and English, understanding users and their needs, providing a joined up experience, and making sure everyone can use the service. So it's that last point there, making sure everyone can use the service, that this piece of work that we undertook is primarily focused upon. Although there are some elements of some of the other pieces, the sustainability and the inclusivity across those points. So, yeah, as I just mentioned, all Welsh services and products should be, or must be, I should say, accessible, inclusive, sustainable, bilingual, and user-centered. And here at CDPS, the Centre for Digital Public Services, we focus very heavily on user-centered, but it was time to take a look at the accessible and to some degree the inclusive side of things during this piece of work. And at this point, it's good to just think for a moment on a quote from Adam Judge, which is, "The alternative to good design is always bad design. There is no such thing as no design." Oh, did I see a hand up? No, that's right. So, looking at everything from a legislative and policy context, that's a mouthful. And looking at the Public Sector Bodies Accessibility Regulations 2018, which states that accessibility regulations came into force back in 2018 that say you must make your website or mobile app more accessible by making it perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And I'm going to kind of skim over these a little bit just to set the landscape on these elements. Looking into the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which calls it out as a more equal Wales, a society that enables people to fill their potential no matter what their background or circumstances. And those two elements, along with other things, really make a focus on ensuring that everybody should be able to access public services no matter their circumstances. So we set about to take a look at the situation within Wales today. And our focus was on understanding how organizations approach their web accessibility with specific looking into websites and online tools and how they're using those, including people with disabilities, but also making content easier to navigate and providing alternative and supporting assistive technologies. So really digging into what people generally refer to as accessibility, but just calling out kind of the definitions there of what we were trying to focus on. And our research was to cover public sector service providers' experiences and processes, the regulatory practices within Wales, and actually nationally, the user experience of the Welsh Public Services, where we plan to look into common accessibility issues that were found across websites and apps, and the general accessibility maturity across the sector to get a feel for how everybody is approaching it and where they're at and how they're thinking about these things. Unfortunately, as it was obviously a limited time for the project, there were a couple of things that were deemed out of scope for this particular project, which were the user accessibility testing, actually sitting down with disabled users and looking at the usability side of things with them, and also we decided that it was decided that digital inclusion was not a primary focus of this project, although there are a few mentions to it throughout. And on that note, oh no, one more slide. So the squad that was at CDPS that worked on this project was a full multidisciplinary team. We had Gabby Mitchum-Evans, who was our senior user researcher, myself as delivery manager, Rob Thomas, who I'll be handing over to shortly as our senior product manager, Tom Brame as a user researcher, Claire Gibbons as a content designer, and Bernie Martin as our service designer. And hope we'll have a chance to hear from most of those throughout this presentation. And on that note, I will pass over to Rob if you'd like to take control. Hopefully that's going to work. Excellent.
Sorry, all. Okay, so the research methodology then. So we use 5 methods when conducting our research to ensure both qualitative and quantitative research was achieved. Desk research to review existing research findings available, which help to identify gaps in our knowledge. Okay, so the limitations to the research were that there is limited awareness of other public sector research on accessibility, which hindered the desk research. Service user recruitment was limited to a single organisation who works with more active disabled people. This may have biased our findings, as these users tend to have a better understanding of accessibility and higher digital literacy than most common service users. I plan to test services with disabled service users was cancelled because it was too complex and time consuming to set up within the time frames that we had allocated. Service provider recruitment and engagement was challenging and took longer than planned because it coincided with school summer holidays. And then better understanding of accessibility regulation enforcement wasn't possible because the EHRC, Equality and Human Rights Commission, weren't able to meet to discuss this at that point in time. Okay, I'll pass it to Claire.
Thanks, Rob. I'm going to share the findings from our desk research and accessibility audits. So starting with desk research, we looked at a wide range of sources to identify gaps in our knowledge and defined our research objectives. What we found was factual understanding of the challenges Welsh public sector organisations face in meeting accessibility regulations, how accessibility of Welsh public services is assessed and tested in Wales and the UK, and we found evidence on the use of assisted technologies with Welsh public sector services and end user feedback on issues like readability and online forms. So moving on now to the accessibility audit findings. We used the Lighthouse dev tool for Chrome to do a simple automated test for accessibility of 54 public sector organisations. We tested one homepage and one service page. 48% scored 100 for accessibility. That's 26 organisations, and that included 9 councils. 26% scored 100 for accessibility and best practice, and that's web development standards. So there are 14 organisations that are the best examples, and that included 6 health boards. 15% scored below 90, and that's 8 organisations that need the most improvement. So here on the left are the high performers by sector. These are the best examples, organisations that scored 100 for accessibility and best practice. So that's 3 out of 22 local authorities, 4 out of 12 national bodies, 6 out of 13 health boards, 0 fire and rescue authorities, although 1 did score 100 in accessibility only, and 1 out of the 3 national parks. Organisations who need improvement to reach 100 for accessibility are broken down as 12 local authorities, 5 national bodies, 7 health boards, 2 fire and rescue authorities, and 1 national park. So the common issues that we found on the pages we tested were small touch targets on buttons and links, which make it difficult for users with limited dexterity to click on them. Low contrast ratios, which makes it difficult for people, especially those with visual impairments, to read the text. Missing or repeated alt text, which confuses screen readers by duplicating content. Invalid ARIA attributes. These describe the button actions to screen readers, and an invalid value can mislead users and create access barriers. And the incorrect order of heading elements, which makes navigation and understanding harder for screen reader users. So automated testing can only do a basic check for accessibility. It can't detect all issues. So we also did some manual testing to better understand how accessible Welsh public sector websites are. We did 8 different checks on the homepage and 1 service page of 6 organisations. And we found that the most common issues were headings weren't front-loaded, they weren't clear or concise, and they weren't tagged correctly. For example, paragraph text was marked as headings. Alt text was poor or missing, and some decorative images had alt text, which is a pain for screen readers because it reads that text out. There was a poor keyboard user experience, having to tab through lots of Facebook posts, for example, to move on. And there's not always clear focus on the elements when tabbing, so you don't know where you are on the page. Some organisations were using complex language, with the average reading age being 14 to 16. whereas gov.uk recommend writing for a maximum reading age of 9, even if you're writing for a specialist audience. 50% of home pages had a readability score of less than 50 out of 100. And I'm going to pass you back to Rob. Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. Okay, so let's take a look at the themes that emerged from our research with service providers then. So the first theme was regarding regulation and enforcement of accessibility standards. Service providers and regulators told us that although there is regulatory and enforcement body in place in England, it's outside of their jurisdiction to cover the Welsh services. As a result, devolved Welsh public services are not their priority. So there are few consequences for some of the Welsh services that don't meet accessibility regulations. Secondly, then the regulator said that in the UK, there are no formal processes to enforce accessibility for public services. Organisations that don't meet these standards are treated leniently, which doesn't encourage them to improve accessibility, unfortunately. Service users also felt that there was little accountability for not providing accessible services. The next one then, so service providers told us that there isn't enough awareness or visibility of the legal enforcement around accessibility within public sector organisations in Wales. Operational teams don't have the evidence required to get senior buy-in for the resources or the budget needed to prioritise accessibility in their organisation. And this quote highlights that there's a lack of clear consequences. On to the second theme then, this centres around organisational setup. Service providers said that there is little or no clarity or consistency over who is responsible for leading on accessibility within public sector organisations, and this is due to a lack of in-house expertise and a lack of dedicated specialist roles in place. Service providers and regulators that said that accessibility doesn't have enough focus in terms of time or funding, and instead of creating new, more accessible services, existing ones are being patched up. And then service providers and users said there is little or no consistency or processes to support the improvement of accessibility across Welsh public sector organisations. And then if we take a look at the results from our survey, it showed that there were mixed responses to the questions asked about an organisation's accessibility maturity. Only 1/4 of respondents said that they felt the standards are adopted and applied systematically within their team and organisation. And then a couple of quotes then. It comes down to passion and want rather than the need to make sure accessibility is covered. And this really highlights the lack of consistency and basic functionality across public services to address the accessibility needs of service users. I'll pass over to Tom.
Cheers, Rob. So I'm just going to run through the last couple of themes that came out of our user research, our user interviews, and then I'll run through the findings from our survey as well. So the third theme was around staff skills and capability. This was a fairly weighty theme. There was quite a lot of insight that came out of this. So the first finding here was that many organisations have low accessibility maturity and awareness. Generally, what we were hearing is that organisations have either low or no awareness of what good accessibility looks like. And as a result, they're producing services that have poor accessibility. Service providers told us that due to a lack of in-house skills, they often rely on third-party suppliers to develop their digital products. 80%, when we asked in our survey, said that they relied quite heavily on third-party suppliers for their digital products. We were also hearing in that the third-party suppliers they use aren't necessarily experts on accessibility, and oftentimes what they were producing on behalf of organisations wasn't necessarily accessible. unfortunately then, because of that lack of skills, the organisation staff couldn't necessarily recognise whether or not the accessibility was good or bad, so it would kind of slip the radar and end up going live. And here's another little snippet from our survey that kind of backs that up. So whilst 35% of our respondents said that the digital products and third-party suppliers create are meeting expected accessibility standards, 20% said they weren't met, and 45% said they didn't know. And it may be that 45% figure is reflective of that lack of in-house skills. So people just don't know what good and bad accessibility looks like. This next finding is around service providers, often not testing their own products with real service users. So nearly a third of the people we spoke to said that they don't ever test their products with real users. Obviously, if you're not testing your product with appropriate users, then we can never tell, or you can never be confident that they're going to be accessible for everyone. Part of the reason behind that lack of testing is because staff don't have the skills and that they struggle to recruit appropriate users for testing. And there was a couple of kind of, I guess, success stories that came out of this as well. So there's a real appetite for improved accessibility skills, guidance and training. The service providers and staff we spoke to are kind of aware that there's that lack of skills, and they're really keen to try and build on that. So there's opportunities there to try and upskill. And there are definitely some teams out in the public sector that are doing good jobs, teams and organisations, I should say. There are people out there who are either already delivering really good accessible products, or they're on a journey to improve their accessibility. Unfortunately, though, those are exceptions to the rule, and most organisations are still not prioritising accessibility as they should. And a couple of quotes related to this theme were that this was in relation to third-party suppliers. How do we know that what they've built is actually compliant with accessibility? And this one, as someone who's an advocate of user testing, this one made my heart flicker a bit. Done and not tested is not done. The final theme was around cultures and attitudes. And the first finding was accessibility is not being prioritised by senior leadership, which in turn impacts on staff commitment. I don't really think that senior leaders understand the value of accessibility, both to the users, but also to their organisation. And there's also that lack of accountability. So they're just not prioritising it. And that filters down throughout the organisation, breeding this culture where there's little commitment then to improving or prioritising accessibility. This was another stat that came from the survey. So we asked respondents how they'd rate their organisation's priority of digital accessibility compared to other standards or regulations. 31% felt that their organisation did prioritise digital accessibility, but that contrasts quite starkly with the 88% who said that they prioritise Welsh language standards and 94% who prioritise data protection. So it shows that there's a long way to go. As a result of that lack of kind of leadership, I guess, staff are feeling really demotivated towards accessibility. There's that prevalent culture where there's that little commitment, and it really impacts on staff motivation. And another thing we picked up was that staff are often overwhelmed by the large backlog of legacy web and application issues that they're trying to work through. They're often spending their days fixing kind of web documents, forms, reformatting them essentially to make them accessible. And whilst they're doing that, that ties them up So they don't have the time to be able to devote to creating more accessible products. And again, a couple of quick quotes. I think it's just one quote this time, actually. Some organizations are frozen by the fear of the scale of the problem. It's too overwhelming. And I think that was representative of a lot of the organizations we spoke to. They don't know where to begin. So I'll move on to the results of our survey. This isn't the full set of results. If anyone does want to see that, then please let us know and we can share. These are just some of the kind of headlines that came out. So we received 20 responses overall from people in various roles, organizations, sectors, and levels of seniority. The roles of the people who responded varied significantly. You can see there the different areas of public sector they responded from. But it's important to note that 90% of the respondents were not in an accessibility specific role, which I think is reflective of the fact that there aren't those roles out there in the sector particularly. So when we asked people how they would rate their organization's digital accessibility maturity, you can see that most respondents rated their organization as having a lower digital maturity. So those measures there, we borrowed from an accessibility maturity model from AbilityNet and tweaked them slightly. But essentially all you need to know is that that bottom axis on the left is lower digital accessibility maturity, on the right is higher, and you can see it's very left leaning. And this is just a visual representation of what I've just mentioned, in that when we asked how they prioritize different regulations and standards, digital accessibility very much came lowest in that area of priority. And you can see it's flanked there by the Welsh language and data protection, which are given much higher priority in comparison. And finally, we asked our respondents in kind of free text to try and outline some of the challenges and barriers that they experience in terms of improving accessibility in their organization. I then kind of compiled them. So we didn't prescribe the answers to this, but you can see the outright winner here was that a lack of awareness, understanding, and skills is a real barrier to them being able to improve their accessibility. But that provides us with an opportunity. Now that we're aware of that, we can look to address that with training, better promotion, that kind of thing. I'll run through a few of the others. So there was also getting buy-in from seniors, legacy systems, lack of appropriate roles and responsibilities, inconsistent approaches, and so on. And similarly, we asked the question of what support they'd need to be able to improve their approach to accessibility. And the main one there, apologies for the tiny text in here, but the main one there was training and guidance, which aligns nicely with what the previous graph told us, that lack of skills and understanding is a real barrier. And there was also something around encouraging organizations to prioritize accessibility, improving culture, and so on. So to wrap it up with a couple of quotes, this first one represents one of the survey respondents' feeling towards accessibility, which is that in their mind, if you're not providing an accessible digital service, you're not providing a digital service. And the last one, I think, is an important one because it's really vital that we recognize this. Getting accessibility right is hard and it takes a lot of resource. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it, but we can see that people out in the sector are really feeling that as well. So that's it from me. I think I'm going to pass over to Bernie, who's going to look at some of the opportunities for improvement.
Hello, excited to get to share with you the opportunity bit at the end. Yeah, that's a lot to take in, but we were just so excited and really kind of enjoyed working through that with everyone and getting it to those insights. Okay, so We made some recommendations from this discovery session, and from that, that was kind of put to the rest of the CDPS and the senior leadership team. They carried that forward with next steps, and yeah, I'd like to kind of put through some opportunities that will come through from insights. So first one, develop accessibility knowledge and skills. This is connected to the recommendations to build and develop upskilling opportunities for all levels of professions, because they all have their own challenges. So when we worked and we understood with the different professions, we found there were different challenges at leadership, middle management and operational level. And then also connected to this is the fact that there's rarely is there a dedicated accessibility role, as you already saw. So give people the opportunity to learn more and do better. The next is about providing flexible guidance to help organisations implement accessibility practices. And this is connected to the flexible element is connected to the fact that Welsh public sector is made up of so many different entities, all at different stages of their digital maturity journey. Any guidance created or pointed to needs to acknowledge that fact. So if people are right at the beginning of creating the digital strategy or actually further along in their journey, there needs to be guidance that, is there appropriate to wherever they are. Next is about specialists. This is connected to the need to champion and lean on those experts who are leading the field in this space. Essentially we can, help facilitate these things and make things happen, but, we need to really work with the subject matter experts, the people leading the field in this area. And then the final one, probably pretty obvious, but really important. When we first set to do this research, you probably saw at the beginning of this, we tried to acknowledge that accessibility is a small part of the wider inclusive element, particularly as, again, we kind of talked about the service standard. But yeah, essentially it's about, the ongoing need to make all our services user, that's both provider and citizen, focused and driven. I know Jo is on the call, but I think she's a bit of a busy coffee shop, so she's asked me to chat these things through with you. So next steps, what's happening? We got these awesome outcomes. We were able to make some, a big fat amount of recommendations to our organisation. What's happening next? Obviously this is one of them. The insights have been made public, and we're able to kind of go, hey everyone, this is where we are. So lovely to actually be seeing that happen. Okay, so we're offering leadership and practitioner training for digital accessibility this quarter. And then in a minute, Mike's going to chat you through some of those events. We recognise the opportunities for opening up information with content design. And again, that's a webinar happening soon, and Mike will chat you through that as well. We're exploring opportunities with Welsh universities to develop the Born accessible work more in Wales and initiate pan-Wales academic networks. And next month is themed for our community practice around accessibility. So yeah, that's really exciting. We've got some fab visitors for that. And then we're taking our research findings to the cross-party group for the digital event in February. And then finally, we're taking our research findings to the Digital Inclusion Programme Board. So yeah, that's me. I'll pass over to Mike now. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bernie. Yeah, hi everybody. So yeah, I'm Mike, Communications Manager at the CDPS, and just giving you a bit of a preview to a couple of other accessibility themed events that we've got coming up. So you can see on screen there, we've got a 1-hour webinar next week with Jack Garfunkel. He's a content designer at Content Design London, and with Jack, we'll be exploring the social model of disability and how it can help you create better, more inclusive products and services. Jack will also explain why legal and medical language can sometimes be a barrier rather than a help. So yeah, if you aren't already signed up to that, I think we have about 80 people signed up to that event already. But if you aren't one of those 80, then yeah, please do sign up, bring your questions. There'll be plenty of time for Q&A with Jack for that one. The next event as well, and we think, again, this is really kind of touching upon the findings about maybe about leaders being blockers. We're running an event for public sector leaders, an in-person event in Cardiff on the 29th of January, which is going to be looking at leadership for accessible and inclusive public services. So this is going to be a panel event, which is going to be really exploring this critical issue. The people on the panel that we've got Rhian Bowen-Davis, Older People's Commissioner for Wales. We've got Joanna Goodwin, our Head of User Centre Design here at the Centre for Digital Public Services. Martin Jones, Wales Committee Interim Chair for the Equality and Human Rights Commission, and Jack will also, from Content Design London, will be joining us as a real subject matter expert in this area. So again, if you or you know someone, a leader within your organization that may be interested in attending that session, then you will find the details in the chat with links to our courses and events. So yeah, thank you for that. And I will pass back to Ed in terms of going to the floor for questions and wrapping things up.
Thank you very much. Yes, so to wrap things up, I just wanted to open the floor for questions. I see that there have been a couple in the chat. Bernie has been monitoring that, so just say so. We've got a question from Sophie Collins. Thank you very much for your question. Can you recommend any methods of getting buy-in from senior leadership? That is, I mean, well, that is when, firstly, I would recommend that people attend the event that's currently still on screen. I think that's, it's, the short version is, we don't have any hard and fast solutions for all of this yet, but I think everything starts with awareness. Is get people informed, help people to understand what can be done, and how it affects the end users, and I think that's a first step. And if anyone on my on the squad would like to chip in, I think Tom's put his hand up, then please do.
I was just going to add that one of the things that seemed to come out of the research for us was around that sense of value. Senior leaders are often very kind of business focused. They have to be as part of their role. So not just to kind of evidence the benefits for end users, but also to show how better accessibility can prove beneficial for the organization, for the team, for the service, for the business as a whole. Those will provide a different set of drivers that can sometimes kind of nudge leaders in the right direction as well, I think.
Yeah, so hopefully that answered your question, Sophie. If not, please feel free to elaborate or pop something else in the chat or whatever you prefer. The next question I'm seeing was from Chris Young. Oh, it's a bit of a long one. I'm curious about the reading age of 9, even for specialist audiences. I know this is guidance on gov.uk, as even technical audience prefer easier readability. However, when the audience is very specific niche, and there's also legal implications of how things are described, it's sometimes very difficult to get buy-in and time capacity to content design policy wording for these audiences. So that level of simplicity, are there any situations, examples where you have the language won't meet this requirement, or where it's just an aim, for example, manuals or policy documents online? This may be best answered by Jack from Content Design London next week. Will this be recorded as can't make the training, unfortunately? Okay, let's answer the easy bit there first. Mike, you probably know better than anyone. Will the session with Content Design with Jack from Content Design London be recorded?
Yeah, the session will be recorded and also be made available on our YouTube channel as well. So yeah, anyone who signs up to the event will get an instant access to that recording post-event.
Excellent. I thought that would be the answer, but I thought I'd give you a chance to say.
Yes, sorry for the ridiculously long question. I started writing it and then you talked about Jack. I thought actually he would probably answer it perfectly. It's basically a question for him, so that's fine, I think.
Yeah.
He's going to talk about it by the sounds of it anyway, in detail.
Yes, hopefully. Oh, I see Joe's put her hand up. So I think she'd like to chip in on that.
I don't know if Claire wants to knock me off actually, because Claire's probably got a really good answer as well for this. But I think for me, so having worked across different technical audiences as well, and particularly my experience with statisticians in central government now, is opening up information and making it accessible and easier to read for all is even better for technical audiences. So it's not just about making sure that it's inclusive and you're not leaving people behind. It's about respecting your user groups enough to make it easy and accessible, even for the experts in the room. So I think for that, it is best practice. It comes back to the small caveat as well of really understanding who the audience and those user groups are and the expectations of those. So if you're talking to a scientific audience, for example, and they would expect a certain language and certain terminology to be used, that would you would need to make sure they're meeting that expectation.
Yeah.
So understanding your user groups,
Kind of
making
what I
sure
mean, yeah, because
and you're not leaving
certain
anybody out.
policy, exactly, yeah. Yeah, thank you.
I don't know if Claire wants to come in as well as our content expert.
No, I think you said it all there, Joe, but I think it's even more important when the content is task related. It's people want to get on with the task. They don't want to be reading, technical jargon at all. They just want to get on and do their task and move on.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Hopefully that answered your question fully, Chris. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Next up, we have a question from Gabby. Sorry, it's just only because Gabby was obviously on the team that worked on this, so I think she's just kind of feeding us questions so we can answer them. What one piece of advice would you give to someone who's feeling overwhelmed by the fear of the scale of the problem, as you found in the research? So unless Tom, did you want to answer this one, or I'm happy to take it? Oh, Bernie wants to answer this one. Okay.
It was actually from some of the people we were interviewing as part of the research. I think quite a lot of the people talked about just breaking down the problem, so sitting down and just working out what your kind of highest areas of frictions are. So I can't remember the organization, but essentially, it was for them, it was the forms that was their number one thing to look at in the first item. But it was the fact that they laid it down, they looked at some kind of audit, and they were able to then measure it, have your tickets and things like that. And it was a way of just measuring it, looking at the impact, and how they could have the the best impact. And it was just as soon as it's then written down and it's scalable and you can go back and explain it with money and figures to people, it just, I think to them it felt a bit more achievable, and they were ticking things off, and it was a mountain that was a bit more achievable to climb as soon as you're able to see it in numbers and stats. So yeah.
Thank you. I wasn't trying to be difficult. I promise. I knew you'd have good advice.
Thank you, Gabby. Next up, there's I'm going to say more of a comment than a question from Jana. So as you're my colleague here, I would I'll give you the floor if you'd like to say that out loud.
Well, I think she's got some problems with her headphones. She's sat next to me.
Okay,
But,
no problem.
there was a small plug for some additional research that she's leading on about skills and capability at the moment. So she's got some information in the chat.
Yeah, there's some information there, and some call for anyone who wants to share experiences. So please do reach out if that's relevant to you. We'd love to hear from you. Next up, I have a question from Kerry Cryer. Did your research look into the prominence, visibility of contact telephone numbers on websites? And I'm going to pass that one to Claire, if that's all right, to answer.
Yes, no, we didn't look at that, but on a side note, I'm aware that there is a pattern by gov.uk to use for telephone numbers and making it consistent on every page so people know where to find it, and it explains how to set it out as well. Well, Andrew, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, just as part of previous work I've been a part of, we know that to demonstrate the numbers is more effective, especially if you have an online tool and sort of give them equal weighting. Mostly it might drive higher call numbers, particularly if you've got a call centre staff who are concerned about that. But what it does reduce is some of the stress and aggression that comes in from people who have had to hunt around for numbers and can provide better performance overall if numbers are just free and easy to get a hold of, because people are less frazzled by the time they call. So that can be effective and does provide more options for accessibility, particularly if you have an offering for different types of accessible contact. So if you have things like language lines, translations, text phones, whatever other technology is being used today as part of call center interaction, that can be really helpful. It may increase call volume, but it might increase call speed because people are in a better position when they call.
Thank you.
Actually, hopefully that answered your question, Kerry.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Next up, sorry, I'm just kind of reading. That was a comment from Oshin. Back to Chris. Yeah, I see that's and Josh. Thank you. Wesley Packer has asked, could someone signpost me to more resources for building technical skills tools within a software testing team? I don't have anything to hand to direct. If anyone else on the squad that worked on this would like to chip in on that. Nope. Yeah, I don't think we didn't specifically look into a lot of the tools. Is all I can say on that one from a software point of view. But we in a previous life I was actually a web developer, and yeah, there are a lot of tools in there for testing. Certainly, tools out there. Everything from things like Silktide, which is used, I believe, for the rankings that you might see of the government websites, but also even just built into your Chrome web browser if you use it, the Lighthouse tool, which we used for a lot of our automated testing. But there's still a lot of manual testing, as Claire mentioned, going through the slides, that these tools can't approximate, because they do need a human to look at things and kind of make those next steps. So sorry I couldn't be more help there, but hopefully that answers your question a little bit there, Wesley. Okay, and sorry, I'm just scrolling down if there's another specific question. And I do apologize if I've missed anybody. Just feel free to put a hand up or something if you feel like I've overlooked you. Oh, yeah, Joe has posted, yeah, some things there as well on the front of those resources for skills and so on. So I'm not seeing any more questions. I will give a quick opportunity in case anyone wants to pop their hand up and ask a question out loud. Okay, I will just go on. Another thing that we like to put into some of these slide decks is there is a bit of a free digital goodie bag available on the CDPS website that you can scan the QR code and go in there. One of the items on there is the ebook of our trio writing information, which is a fantastic resource for designing and writing content bilingually. So just a little push of that. Yeah, finally, just a massive thank you to all of you. It's really encouraging to see so many people interested and coming along to this event. And yes, we are obviously doing a lot in this space and would love to kind of keep in contact with everybody. So thank you very much for coming. And as we mentioned before, we'll be sending out the information. Sending out this slide deck along with recordings. So if you want to catch up on anything, reread it, then it'll be available to you. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Diolch, hwyl.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye.